Hello, everyone. Welcome for coming. Thank you for coming out this evening to Darien Library. This is the first event in our fall Meet the Author series, and we're very excited to have tonight's guest here. We are welcoming her back. She was here in 2011 to discuss her memoir, The Foremost Good Fortune. She's here tonight to discuss her very first novel. I also just wanted to let everyone know that if you're here tonight, you'd probably also be interested in an event that we have next Thursday, October 10th at 4 p.m. Carol Rifka-Brunt, author of Tell the Wolves I'm Home, will be here. We're going to have a tea, so we'd love it if you could join us. I would like to just briefly mention that programs at Darien Library are made possible by our annual Friends of the Library campaign. So thank you so much for your continued support to make programs like these available to the community. Tonight's guest, like I said, last visited us in February 2011. Her memoir, The Foremost Good Fortune, won the main literary award for memoir and was a Goodreads Choice Award winner. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Huffington Post, the Daily Beast, the Paris Review, the Harvard Review, the Massachusetts Review, and elsewhere. She's visiting us this evening to discuss her first novel, Paris Was the Place. This story gives us a luminous, emotional portrait of a young woman living abroad in Paris in the 1980s, while trying to make sense of the chaotic world around her as she learns the true meaning of family. Richard Rousseau said, "Paris Was the Place" has the kind of emotional weight you hope for in a novel. Its world, by turns achingly beautiful and brutally unjust, is as vividly rendered as its characters, whose joys and struggles we embrace as our own. Please join me in welcoming to Darien Library Miss Susan Conley.
Thank you. It's a treat to be back here. I have really fond memories of being here with that memoir of mine because I didn't know anything about book tours. And this library made me feel very comfortable and welcome. And now it's 3 years later, and I have written this novel. So I feel like I come to you as someone who has spent a lot of time in memoir and a lot of time talking about memoir, and is now sort of borrowing from life, real life, and sort of weaving it into fiction. So this is not an autobiographical novel, but we'll talk about it afterwards. I think that often autobiographical sort of facts come into play when we write novels. I'm going to take us back to Paris. It's 1989. Let's go on a road trip. We are going to go to the south of France. Our narrator is a woman named Willow, or she actually goes by Willie, and she is 30. She's an American, and she's just landed in France about 6 months ago, and she's been convinced to do some volunteer work at a refugee center for girls. She's fallen in love with the lawyer at the refugee center. His name is Macon. She's very smitten, and because of that, she's agreed to go on this kind of crazy road trip with him. So imagine that you're 29 and you haven't really ever had a big love. You don't have kids. You don't know what your future holds. So yes, you get in the car and you drive. Here we go. Macon pulls up to the curb outside my building on Friday in a small blue pickup truck, not a car. I walk into the street and lean my face through the driver's window. Good morning. Then I say it again, good morning. It's almost like tasting him, to breathe him in like this. 9 o'clock and warmer than it's been all year. The poplars look like they're wearing green headdresses, full and leafy. I pat the hood of the truck like it's a dog. You got a nice petite bébé truck, I say. It's a Renault with a square cab and round hubcaps and some kind of plaid synthetic fabric over the seat. You like it? He says, and he taps the dashboard with his fingers and grins that grin. I borrowed it from a law student at the office, he says. We're starting small. We wouldn't want a truck we couldn't handle. I make myself walk slowly to the passenger side. Walk, don't run. And I hoist my tote bag onto the floor. I'm nervous. I say, I found a new word. I'm driving away from the city with Gita's lawyer, and no one at the refugee center knows about it. I haven't left Paris since I got here in September. I say, I called the school last night, and I try to slow myself down. I told them I was coming down with the PIP. You didn't. Macon raises his eyebrows. They're the same shade of brown as his eyelashes. I say the PIP is vague enough to cover lots of symptoms, and I glance up once at my apartment while we pass by. The iron balcony looks like cake decoration from down here, with thick florets and black metal leaves. I know the PIP, Macon says, and he clicks the left blinker and puts the truck in first gear. We head south over a series of cobblestone blocks lined with leaking gutters and sagging electrical lines. I imagine my apartment then. I like that apartment. The balcony looked good enough to eat. And where are we going? Who is he, this man? A diesel bus grinds its gears and releases a blast of smoke, and we're thrown back into the late 20th century. Then we're on a wider avenue that runs along the front of the garden. I think it's called Saint-Hilaire, or maybe that's just the last part. Some of the street names here are so incredibly long. I try to stay hopeful. We're driving to the beach. Paris, the movie, unfolds while he drives through the narrow streets, and the city looks different to me already. It's the effect of being inside the truck with him. I belong here more now, in France, simply because somebody wants to drive with me. It's small, but it's also everything. The gardens even look different. The plants are a study in the most beautiful greens, with high and low shrubbery and small banks of hedges and rose bushes. Is it the idea of love that does this? Gives the city backlighting and connects me to it? Because if I let myself believe I can love Macon, then everything else in my life seems possible, completely surmountable. I decide then that the greatest thing in the world is to long for someone and then get to sit next to them in a small French truck driving south toward Lyon. We had the PIP in Toronto. Macon laughs this time. American girls get colds. They get stuffy noses or the flu, not the PIP. Your school will know you made it up. And I stare at him while he drives, and I wonder if I'll love him, truly love him. No, they won't, I say. Today marks the beginning of my life with the PIP, and what I want to know is if symptoms include the need to drive all day down the center of France. They often do, he says. And camp on a beach with a man you don't know? Very common, he says. And we pass through the 5th arrondissement. The rattan chairs are filled with Parisians smoking cigarettes and reading Le Monde. The 13th sits directly under the 5th, and the buildings here are taller, more modern. We crawl around a traffic circle where a small orchard of magnolia trees blooms pink. Farther into the 13th, we pass a check cashing center and a string of Asian restaurants and food stalls. My brother Luke feels far away from me now, even though we're still in his city. So do my father and my friend Sarah. Everything's been reordered. I'm calling it the truck of requited longing. It's Macon and me driving to the beach. Did you bring anything? He nods towards the tape deck. The blue street sign reads A6, Lyon, Bordeaux. He says, I remembered sleeping bags and wine, but I forgot music. He hunches forward until he's hugging the steering wheel with both arms, and I have the urge to give away all of my secrets to him, right now, all of them, and to see if he receives them or turns away. This is the part of myself I'm trying to calibrate. He smiles. He says, how can there be a road trip through France without music? And we pass the exit for the airport and the parking garages off the highway. I peel a tangerine to calm down. I have music, I say, and the rind piles in my lap. I paw through my bag again. The suburbs give way to small fields, and there are goats in fenced-in plots and stone farmhouses so close to the city. I have music, I say, if you like the singer Ricky Lee Jones. I put this tape in, and the song is called Chuck E's in Love. What is this song? Macon says. This song, I roll my window up halfway, is so good that I spent whole days playing it in my bedroom in college. The singer is in a pool hall. The boy she loves goes after another girl. I put my hand out so it cuts through the wall of wind. which whips my hair around my face, and another hour passes. Paris feels far behind. The fields are bigger now, each plowed into a different sized rectangle and conjoined into a patchwork of brown soil and dark soil and chartreuse leaves. It's just after 11 in the morning, and the greenish-white tips of the trees sparkle in the sun, and everything is within reach. Love, belonging, it's always just within reach. Loneliness is vanquished. The bass of the song travels to my stomach, and it feels so good, exhilarating even. And gone is that feeling of being just a foreigner watching, of being one step removed. Did you even listen to music growing up in Canada, I ask him, and I peel another tangerine. Estonian folk songs, he says, with a straight face. Ha, I say. He says, my mother played albums on a gramophone. How, I ask, could you miss one of the most important women singers of the 1980s? Willie, he says, I think I'm a lot older than you. Either that or I'm too busy constructing court cases. I put my bare feet up on the dashboard and I say, do you think you have a case built for Gita? Do you think you have enough material, enough facts? That is work, he says, and this trip is play. You're considerate to worry, but it's my job. I take it very seriously. I'll do everything I can. Gita isn't work making, I say. She's our friend. Your friend, he says, your student, my client. And yes, of course I'm working on it. He can shut off like this and sit in the quiet. Me, I'm trained to fill empty spaces. And maybe Macon doesn't subscribe to small lies out of convenience to please people. My mother was like that too. She didn't believe in half-truths. She would have never called the school to say she was coming down with the pip. She would have said she was going to the beach. God, I say, I never knew how much farming went on in this small country, and I stretch my arms out and almost touch his shoulder with my left hand. France, he says, is surprisingly self-sufficient and proud, very proud. God, I love this country. Every 5 miles or so, there's a wooden farmhouse in between the fields and barns and equipment sheds. Then every 20 miles, there's a village built from coffee-colored stone. The rows of leggy trees stand in a boundary line at the town's edge, and from here the villages look happy to be left behind by the highway. The flat roofs create a line in the sky that remains in my mind long after we've passed, asking, what would it be like to live here? What is your old life that you could leave it behind? We drive south and slightly west, so we miss Dijon, and I nap sitting up. But I don't have any memory of napping. I look at my watch when I wake, and 4 hours have passed since we left Paris. My lips are chapped. There's that twang again of being the outsider. Just one string of it, but it's there while I'm still half asleep. We're far from Paris now. I hope it's good. This drive, the beach. The fields give way to thick forests of pine, and the bigger towns way off in the distance built along the ravines. There are signs for Beaune, and then newer towns appear, rippling in circles from a center I can't see. I can only make out the farthest subdivisions, rows of small, square stucco houses and red tin roofs. It feels like we're driving across the whole country in one day. The truck eats up the miles. France is so small, I say again, so incredibly small. And everything in the truck seems to be about the mediated space on the seat between us. Where will we sleep? Am I crazed? Maybe I shouldn't have come. Talking helps, but he doesn't mind long silences, and I can only talk so much. It's ridiculous driving away from my job. I like that job. I need it. I've worked there 6 months to the day. 5 hours pass and we get to a puzzle of off-ramps and small highways circling Lyon. It's a bigger industrial city with snarls of traffic and long lines of French trucks with canvas tarps. Then the road opens up again and winds through orchards and over small sloping hills. It's past 2. I slip in a tape by a band called Los Lobos, and Macon puts his hand on my knee. I want to sing now, but I don't know any of the words, so I hum, confined to body language, willing his hand to stay on my knee where it's burning an imprint. I'm ready for whatever happens between us. How do I say this? He pulls me closer with his free arm. Spanish lyrics, he laughs. You're humming in Spanish. We come up quickly on a white Peugeot, and before we incorporate it into our grill, Macon takes his hand off my leg and pulls out to pass. That was close, I say, and I will the hand back. Name 2 places in the world you most want to go. Tartu, he says, both hands on the steering wheel now. Tar what? In Estonia, he says, near the Baltic Sea. Tartu, it's the city my family comes from. I cross one leg under the other. Do they speak Russian there? Estonian? What language? It's Russian, yes, and some French. He passes another black truck on the hill, and I'll get there, he says. There's still a house my parents own. He's quiet now. They had to leave quickly, he says. Who did? I know so little about him. He says, I started to tell you this the other night at the bar, the leaving of the house, the defining moment of the century for my family. What year are we in now, I say? 1944. The story still goes that Stalin's trucks were on their way. For my father, it's as if he left yesterday. He walked away from his bedroom and his model airplanes and his books about flight. He's haunted, I ask? It got decided quickly, Macon says. Either you were going or you were not. And my grandfather was a scientist. He took my grandmother and my father with him. So there's still a house that no one's seen in 40 years, but yes, my family owns it. Your family has lost a house, I say. So you and Gita are both exiles in Paris. I'm French, Willie, Macon says. My mother was born in Paris. Gita is from India. It will be so much harder for her to make a life here. You know that, yes? But even harder for her if she's forced to go back to India, I say. I understand your willingness to help Gita, Macon says, and I've had that need too. Then it settled down into a job. You'll settle also, not because you'll stand for anything less, but because life is long and it's hard to keep up that energy you have now. It's impossible, for example, for me to form special ties with each of my clients. He pauses. The second place I'd go to if I could is Joshua Tree in California. I think you are the most unsentimental person I know, I say. Then you don't know me very well at all, Macon says. I cry at the movies, even comedies. I am what you call a sap. I have fallen heedlessly for you. Don't you see that? It's perhaps the most sentimental thing I've ever done. And I'm shamelessly courting you because I have a need to see your face every day and this long red hair. His face is very serious. Then he looks back at the road. So have you been to this desert? The things he said are symphonic in my head. They keep playing there. I hear myself say, I've been to Joshua Tree, and the trees look like old men. There are whole fields of them. But what I'm really thinking is he has a need to see me every day. My face, my hair. I say, my brother and I camped there in college. He rubs his eyes with his right hand while he drives, and he looks over at me. But you are from this golden land called California, Willie. Another black truck filled with apples slows on the hill, and Macon glances over his left shoulder. It's been almost 2 hours since Lyon, and I'm starving. I pull a baguette and a small jar of Nutella from my bag. It's a circus act, he says. What else are you hiding in that bag? I'm hungry and tired now and overcome by this lassitude. It's a deep physical sleepiness that the drive has brought on. My mind is thick and dreamy. I walked into a refugee center on Rue des Metz in Paris, and I met 6 girls and a lawyer, and everything began to change. When will we see the ocean? I can almost smell it now, signs for Avignon. I long for the ocean like a person, like my mother. The closer we get to the water, the deeper my longing is. My brother is probably taking a nap in his Paris apartment, and I miss him. I'm almost asleep. Is there a way to find a payphone to call Luke? He's my family. He's how I make sense of Paris and of moving away from my father and the open-ended sadness I felt in California after my mother died. I look out the window at the brown hills and the wiry trees, olive trees. My mother is gone, and I feel quieter about her death here. In California, all I wanted to do was yell. Where are your parents now, Willie? Macon asks. I say we lived on the coast in a town called Sausalito. My father's still there, at least I think he is. I haven't talked to him since last spring. Do you mean your parents are divorced? I miss my mother so much then. It's a longing I can't speak of to him. My mother is dead. Ouch, he says. I'm so sorry. Right after my mother died, my father designed this bench for her. Granite, way too shiny, because that's the only way he said they came. He asked me to help with the wording of the engraving, but I couldn't. It was too removed from her, a bench in a strange town in Montana where all her family was buried. She didn't know anyone in that state, except her sisters. Her life condensed to a sentence. Macon just nods. He's good at listening. Once, I say, and I rip the bread into smaller pieces and prop the Nutella on my knees. It was impossible to live without my dad. But then my mom died, and it was crazy to try to live near him. I try to hand Macon the bread dipped in chocolate, but he opens his mouth, so I lean over and I feed him and get Nutella on his chin, and we laugh, and he wipes the chocolate with his thumb. It's better that you're in Paris, he said, better that I met you. An hour after Avignon, we pull into a service station in a town called Aix-en-Provence. It's a one-story blue concrete shop with a concrete parking lot. 2 red gas pumps sit out front in the bright sun. Macon pulls up to the first one, and I get a metal key on a dirty string from a teenage boy in a mechanic suit and find a bathroom. When I step back into the sun, there's this huge flock of birds passing over, thousands of them. The sky darkens with birds until it looks like rain. I jog back to the truck and jump in. Macon bangs the gas nozzle down and slides in beside me. The birds turn the inside of the cab darker too, so that it feels almost like night. He takes my hand and kisses it quickly. The birds fly hard as if they're straining to pull something, a black blanket, over the sky. When the sun reappears, I'm on Macon's lap, one leg wrapped around either side of him, small kisses over each other's faces and mouths, laughing. We kiss, and I'm connected to the truck and the birds and the green trees that flank the sides of the gas station driveway. It's not often we receive what we want. We stop kissing only because a car pulls in behind us. Then we have to disentangle, and I'm laughing again. He puts the truck in first gear and second and third and accelerates onto the highway. And I have that sense again that everything is in reach. The drive, my brother Luke, the beach where we will camp tonight. And I will end there. Thank you. I have to say that there are some surprise friends here from college, and I read such a collegiate kind of piece. It was really kind of fun. Oh, we probably listened to that song together, and that song. So that was kind of fun. Yes, road trip, Paris, France. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts. It's kind of can be funny to transition from listening to talking, but I'm happy to answer questions. Yes.
Well, I found some of the passages in your book are just so detailed geographically in Paris, including the passage that you just read. So I was wondering, did you get to go to Paris while you were researching the book? Did you study abroad there? Did you live there at some point? How did you write these really detailed?
Right.
I think that they're accurate. I'm not a expert, but they sound accurate.
I hope they're accurate. Yeah, you can't really get Paris wrong. If you get it wrong, you get it really wrong. You know, I was actually at our alma mater last week, in fact, I think, Middlebury, and I did go to Paris when I was at Middlebury for one of those semesters abroad. But I had this memory when I was there of this great thing that a writing teacher told me. And it was that I was in the class, he said, you're starting to be able to solve the problems that you create for yourself in your writing. Sort of like a complicated kind of compliment, but it resonated with me, and I've held on to it all these years. You're starting to solve the problems you create for yourself in your writing. And I really think that that's kind of what novels are. You create these problems, and then you have to solve them. And for me, when I decided to put this book in Paris, it was kind of a problem, because the stakes felt rather high. I couldn't get it wrong. So I went about being extremely meticulous about the mapping of it. And I have a character in here. Willie's kind of zany father is a cartographer. I think the real name I'm learning is geographer in the old days. He's a geographer. He makes maps, and he makes them the old-fashioned way. It's the 60s, and he's trudging around in the desert making maps. So maps were already informing this book. And then I'm very obsessed with place. I'll read you the title line. It's very short. It's a Gertrude Stein line from a piece of prose. And so when hats in Paris are lovely and French and everywhere, then France is all right. So Paris was the place. Gertrude Stein. Yeah, you love that?
I love that. I just spent my summer in Paris.
Ah.
I just spent 7.5 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
In Paris, living there, taking classes there in writing, and it was phenomenal. And my instructor in my course was a Gertrude Stein fanatic.
Oh my
So
goodness. So we were meant to be together.
That's when I saw this. I was like, I have to go. Like, we were meant to meet, and I
Wow.
was meant to hear about your book. So
That's so funny.
It was, yeah. So and listening to the road trip and your descriptions of the farmland and how you forget how agricultural France is.
Yeah.
And once you get outside the city limits of Paris, it is another world. It is a completely different world, and it's beautiful, and you did it beautiful justice. So.
Oh, it's so fun to have you here.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And I have a passion for poetry, and so I slide poetry into this book a lot, and Gertrude Stein features more in the book. I teach a lot, and that's something that I say to my students a lot is, put the stuff that you love in your work, the stuff that makes you excited. So if it's poetry, then do that. You don't always have to write what you know, but write the things that you are passionate about, or at least get them in there. So I was able to get Paris in there. In fact, I have to tell you a short little tiny anecdote. Marianne Paternini's here, and she's so involved with the library, and she's such a dear friend and supporter. And her son's dear wife, Sarah, is a wonderful journalist and a really good friend of mine. We were on a walk, maybe 9 months ago in Portland, where we live, and I said, Sarah, I'm nervous. I've written, it's all set in Paris. I'm gonna screw it up. How can I get that right? And she said, this is the journalist, the New York Times journalist. She said, it's fine, don't worry. Just make sure no Parisian would read it and think anything was off. And I had to go home and lie down after that. I was like, what have I done? And so another problem, I created a problem that I had to solve. And after she said that, I became a crazy woman in my little writing room. I got so many maps. And I had them all, and then I didn't like them. They were too confusing, so I made my own maps on hand-drawn paper, and I knew to the metro stop everyone's movements because I really wanted to bring you to Paris in the book. I felt like you needed to feel like you had gone there for it to work for me. I was at a reading not long ago, and a woman gave me sort of a gift. She told me that my memoir, which is all about Beijing and China and my family's time there, opens with me holding a map. And the very first page of this book, Willie is holding a map. So I seem to be really needing to write about place. In fact, I seem to write about place so much that Middlebury is doing their whole alumni magazine. This is on place. So guess who's writing the introduction? Yes, place. yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions or making you think
Why
about?
does Macon choose Joshua Tree as his second choice? When I first read it, I was surprised. I mean, I know Joshua Tree well, so that kind of
Right.
shook me up, other than it ties Willie
Right.
back to that.
Why does he do that? So he was raised in Toronto. His father flees Estonia. He's raised in Toronto with his Parisian mother, and then when it's college time, he goes to Paris. But his parents have this fascination with the United States. They name him Macon, actually, after Macon, Georgia. So they're like in love with the South. And then he becomes, you know, these foreigners, I met them all the time in China. They're obsessed with the American West. They have to get to Joshua Tree. They have to get to California. This is the golden land. So this is why. And because it's iconic and you see the photos of those trees all the time. You know, maybe he saw the U2 album cover. It's called Joshua Tree. It's probably timed. It's probably right around 89 or something.
That is a quintessential 80s album. Like,
See? I should have had that in there. So I think that's why. And I will also add that all sounds very convincing, but I happen to love Joshua Tree. And I've camped there. So this is you're taking us back to this place where fact and fiction meet. And I'm calling it the middle ground again. It's sort of like a thing I knew something about that I was passionate about, and I could connect it to that character. And I found that I did that a lot in here. There's nothing in this novel that you would say, oh, that's true. Like, that's from my life. But there's a whole lot in this novel that's informed by emotional truth, if you will, memories, things that I feel very akin to, even if they didn't factually happen. So I teach about that a lot. I talk about that a whole lot, encouraging students to let go of that filial obligation to the facts when they're writing fiction, and getting memoir writers to really dig deeper into their personal stories and really find that story hidden inside the story, if you will. So one of the greatest compliments that I've been given about this novel was a librarian, in fact, who said that it felt like a memoir. And I thought, okay, that's what I hoped, sort of that intimate voice. Yeah. I don't know if there's any other questions here as we close out. Yeah.
I'm just curious whether refugee, I will be completely, I have not read the book yet, but I'm curious where the refugee angle came from. Like, I know that you were saying, you don't necessarily have to write what you know, and,
Right.
and I get that.
Right.
However, I'm just curious where.
Right, where did that come from? Yeah, that's another great example for me of weaving in my own experience. I have taught refugees a lot. Actually up in Portland, Maine, at a writing center called the Telling Room, and it's a writing center that I started with two writer friends, including Mike Paternity and his wife Sarah Corbett, and we offer free programming to all kids ages 8 to 18. It's all storytelling, and we have this incredible new face to Portland with relocated refugees, mostly from the Sudan and from Somalia and Southeast Asia, and they have incredible stories to tell. So here they are in Portland, and I've gotten to teach them a lot. And, for me, it was teachers that kind of changed my life. Like, at each juncture, there's been a teacher that's turned the light on. So for me, I wanted to write about that experience of having this teacher. So Willie gets to be really, really tight with her student Gita. And that's kind of the whole idea, is how do you explore, I really wanted to really get inside that relationship between a teacher and a student. And this happened to be a refugee student, yeah. And really, if you look at the bigger frame of this book, it's very much about how do we belong, who's our family, and these girls don't have family. Willie doesn't actually have much family, so yeah. So that's kind of how it works, yeah. Anyone else here as we close it out? Okay, thank you all so very much for coming and listening, and coming out. I know it's not easy to get out on any night, like Thursday night, but thank you all.